Welcome to In the Spotlight. I'm Abigail Pogrebin. My guest today is Rabbi Dalia Marx, PhD. She is the Aaron D. Pankin Professor of Liturgy and Midrash at HUC-JIR's Taub Family Campus in Jerusalem. And she teaches in various academic institutions in Israel and in Europe. Dalia is a 10th generation Jerusalemite, and she's involved in various research projects. She is active in promoting liberal Judaism in Israel and writes for academic and popular journals and publications. Dalia is the chief editor of Tefillat HaAdam, the Israeli Reform Prayer Book. And while her books are published in Hebrew, a feminist commentary of the Babylonian Talmud has been translated into English. And recently, her book, From Time to Time, Journeys in the Jewish Calendar, which we are going to talk about today, has been published in English by CCAR Press with a translation by Rabbi Peretz Rodman. Welcome to the broadcast, Rabbi Dr. Dalia Marx.
Hello, good to be with you. Thank you for having me here today.
So before we get to this wonderful book, From Time to Time, I want to just anchor our viewers in a little bit of your Jewish story. So can you just tell us, I know you're 10th generation Israeli. Can you just give us a bit of a sense? Sorry?
Jerusalemite.
Jerusalemite. Sorry, there's a difference. So tell us a little bit about you.
I think I'm a typical mix. I speak with you here from my home in Jerusalem. My mother came from a Sephardic family that, as you said, dwelled in Israel, in Jerusalem for many generations, before that in Tzfat. And they are the descendants of Jews who were expelled from Spain and then migrated in the Middle East until they came here. And my father's family came mostly from Germany. They escaped Nazi Germany in 1938. And so I grew up here in what you would call a secular family. In other words, we lit Shabbat candles, and my father did Kiddush. We went to the synagogue twice a year, but not much more than that. Yeah, my mother was very interested in Jewish studies, but not from a perspective of, lifestyle or of, faith, but in intellectual from intellectual point of view.
And your desire to go to rabbinical school, where did that come from?
That's the question I always dread. Not because it's very sensitive or there's something I don't want to talk about.
I'm so glad I asked it.
It's just because I don't think I have a very good answer. I think around my bat mitzvah year, I had a beautiful party, but nothing very spiritual. I didn't read from the Torah because it was very strange in Israel in those days. But around these years, I found out that I was Jewish, believe it or not. And it's funny because I grew up in Jerusalem. I grew up in Israel. We celebrated all the Hagim at school. We spoke Hebrew. But it was something that was just embedded in life. We didn't really have to make choices about it. We didn't really have to think about it. That's why, a lot of Israelis, when they come to North America, they find their Jewishness in very meaningful ways. And it's strange. Kids after the army go to URJ or Ramah summer camps and find their Jewishness. So I sort of understood that I have to do something about my Jewishness. And the education I got did not allow me to sit in a place where there's a mechitza, where there's separation between the genders. So I found myself in the reform movement.
And I will say, because you can't say it about yourself, that your reputation precedes you as a scholar of scholars, that many people turn to your writing and your teaching over the years. And I want to just quote Rabbi David Ellenson of blessed memory, who was chancellor of HUC and died so sadly and so suddenly last year. He says in his foreword of your book, Rabbi Marx proves herself a matchless spiritual guide for Jews and others who look to the Jewish year for meaning. This work displays Jewish creativity and depth at its best. Those are pretty nice words. So let's get to this book that he just extols, From Time to Time, Journeys in the Jewish Calendar. As someone who wrote a book about the Jewish year for probably a little bit more of a secular audience and an American one, this started, first of all, in Israel only in Hebrew and has now been translated beautifully.
Several languages.
But just give us from 10,000 feet, what's kind of the elevator pitch of why this book? Why did we need this book about the holidays?
As you said, there are many books about the holidays or about the year cycle, and this come from a specific angle. My purpose was, I would call this book my love letter to the Jewish people. That's really how I envision Judaism, what it can be, what it should be. In other words, it brings together many voices from afar and from near, ancient voices, contemporary voices, Western voices, that is, say, Ashkenazic Jews, but also from the East, Sephardic, Ethiopian, Mizrahi. It brings all denominations and many voices, although not everything goes, right? I did not include racist voices, machoist voices, chauvinist voices. That's not in the book. But I really made a point to include a lot of voices, and especially female voices, right? Because as you know, we comprise about 50% of the Jewish people, but
sometimes you'd never know it.
Exactly. It's very hard to hear the voices of Jewish women across the generations. And that was basically one of my tasks, to identify festivals that Jewish women celebrated, and special rituals that Jewish women did, and also things that women wrote. So that was a priority for me. Yes.
So the structure is basically a month per chapter, correct?
Yes.
And let me know if I'm right about these. These are kind of the signposts along the way. You have a kavanah, intention, for each,
yes.
An introduction, it's a poem of the month. And then you have these sections that are like essays. You call them iyunim, and they examine different topics, and a prayer of the month. Am I right?
Exactly. And every month is presented with this kind of medal with little symbols in it.
I'm just gonna show, like, this is Tishrei.
Exactly.
It's, first of all, very beautiful.
So the medal contains symbols of things that will be discussed. It's like a little riddle, right? Things that will be discussed along the chapter. And what my interest was to bring things that are maybe not often discussed. And it's interesting because for writing for Israelis is something else than writing for a North American audience. I'll give you an example of a chapter we did not include in the English version. I do something about Hanukkah and Christmas. And in Israel, it's something that you really have to explain because people don't know it, you know.
They don't know Christmas.
They don't know the December dilemma, the whole thing about how Jews outside Israel, and especially North America, have this multicultural, sometimes dilemma, sometimes richness, sometimes, you know. So in the Hebrew version, I went on it. In the English version, not so much, because I think you can teach me about it. It's not something I need to teach you. But there are some things that are more Israeli that I explained a little bit more.
Yeah. So let's start with an example, just so people can get a flavor for it. We're actually talking during Elul on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, so it's perfect. And whenever this airs, obviously the high holidays are in a way timeless because we always come back to them. But that's like the first
thing about the Jewish cycle, the Jewish time, that's the beauty of it. It always comes back.
So the first is Kavanah, a meditation for Tishrei. First, just make sure, so we are, I know this is a very literate audience, but define Tishrei.
Tishrei is, Tishrei is the first month of the Jewish year now, not in biblical time. In biblical times, that was the 7th month. The biblical year began with a month that we call now Nissan. That's the month we celebrate Pesach in. In the Torah, they didn't know the word Nissan or Tishrei. The names of the months are much later. We only see them in the second temple time, when the Jews returned from Babylon, and they brought with them the names of the months that were used in Mesopotamia. And that's very interesting in my mind because some of these names bear a clear pagan meaning, right? Like Tammuz is Dumuzi is a Mesopotamian deity, right? And I find it very interesting and also compelling that the Jews did not mind using these names, but giving them their meaning. They said, okay, you think that Tammuz is a deity, and we call it Tammuz because we want to call it Tammuz. And the same with the months that we're talking in Elul, right? Elul. What is Elul? We can give an explanation what Elul in the Babylonian cultures is. But the rabbis are saying Elul is an acronym of four words that we take from Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, Ani ledodi, vedodi li. I am for my beloved, and my beloved is for me. And it talks about the special nearness and special connection that we have with God during this time of the year, preparing for high holidays.
Now, I love the first text that you have with the start of the year. I give thanks. Is that your language?
Yes.
And I'm going to read it now because I just want everyone to hear. With the start of a new year, I give thanks for the ability to choose, to change things, to change and be changed. Rosh Hashanah is a reminder of the marvelous gift we've been given, the ability to make a change, along with the recognition that there are things that have happened that cannot be changed. We are reminded that much is still in our hands, subject to our choice. So first of all, what I love about that is it gets me thinking about what is immovable and what is malleable. Like, what do I have an effect on and what is beyond me? And I personalize it right away. My dad died in March. I can't change that.
Sorry.
I thank you. What I can change is how I spend time with my mother now, and whether I'm spending enough time, for instance, and whether I should atone for maybe not showing up enough. That's just a snapshot of where I go when I read this.
Right.
And obviously, we're talking during a war, and so many of us have felt. While you're obviously living it much more closely, we felt helpless. Like we have all of these feelings and all of this sense of solidarity, but not a lot of agency, not a lot of affect in terms of what we can do. So just when you wrote these words, you obviously wanted to keep them open enough that in any moment we could find ourselves in them.
That's right. And I think when we talk about our time, our Jewish time, a lot of the things we say receive new meanings and understanding, and new lights are shown within them in different times. So now that we think about, when you read this passage, I was thinking about the situation that we are in now, and I really love the way you described it, that we don't have a lot of agency. But I think Jewish time sort of gives us some agency, because there's something that is very powerful about the flow of time. You know, earlier today, I gave a class to the progressive rabbis of Europe, and all of them were so, helpless. And what am I going to say in my sermons? I think it's all over, here in Israel, in your neighborhood, everywhere. What are we going to say? But I feel that the fact that we know that Rosh Hashanah is coming, the New Year's Day is coming. There's no way you can
stop it, hold it off, delay it.
Exactly. Right. So it's gonna be, and there's some things in our lives that still remains the same, and that gives you some comfort, that gives you some structure, that gives you some agency in a very chaotic reality that we're in. I don't know what's gonna be the situation in Rosh Hashanah. I kind of envy your listeners, your viewers that will see it after Rosh Hashanah and will know. I hope things will be much better than they are now. But that's part of it, yes. And talking about Jewish times, especially, is something that is, I think, unique in our situation now. In Israel, we're not in a good place, not only externally but also internally. We can't really agree upon anything at all, right? There's great discrepancy between people. There's a lot of
strain.
Strain, sometimes hostility. Some families cannot have a Shabbat dinner together anymore because people are at each other's neck because they have their different political view. But there's one thing that really keeps us together. And that's the one thing that kept us together throughout the so many years that we were dispersed, and we're still dispersed in the four corners of the world. And that's Jewish time that we kept voluntarily. So no matter what, right? We're talking now on, this is Thursday. No matter what, in 2 days, it's going to be Shabbat. Right. So your practice is different than my practice, maybe on the other guy or woman practice, fine. But Shabbat is there, and this is a very, very meaningful thing that no matter what,
yes, we have to show up, and then it's the Jewish, and the Jewish schedule doesn't wait for hours. You know, we're living in a time when everything is, well, I don't know if you know the word bespoke. Like, I decide when I want to watch a Netflix series, when I want to exercise, it's all online for me. I don't have to go to a class at anybody's schedule. If I wanted to learn Hebrew, I could do it on my own time. This is Jewish time requires us. It's not our volition. You know, it's not up to us. I want to just, if we just,
but it is our choice how we address it. Yeah,
and frankly, if we observe it, I mean, if we show up for it, I mean, there's some
and
people,
how. And this is not something that was always there. You know, this is something that is important to remember when you think about 2,000 years ago in Second Temple time. Jews disagreed, you know, when Shavuot is going to take place. There were many disagreements. How do we determine the times and a lot of things? And today, when we really cannot agree on anything, basically, the time is the one thing that keeps us on the same track. And that's, I think, something that is very hopeful.
So you also include this poem by Bertolt Brecht. It's called Everything Changes. I'm just going to read that first line. Everything changes. You can begin anew with your very last breath. It's such a strong idea that even, frankly, maybe when you're out of life, because so much of this holiday is, am I going to get another day? Am I going to be written into the book of life? And this gives you a sense that even if you're, you know, depleted or frankly dying, you have something you can change, you can alter your path, which I feel like it's extremely optimistic and hopeful.
That's true. You know, Bertolt Brecht is not a Jew, but
it's just an example of the elements that you have in this book.
That's a very Jewish concept, I think. You know, to believe that there's always tikkun, right? As long as the candle is lit, one can letaken, one can repair, do it better, heal. And I think this is a very profound concept that we find in Judaism, and this is something that gives us all a lot of power, a lot of strength and agency and resilience toward difficult times, because it's always a chance to make things better, even as you said.
You mentioned candles, and I love that you spend quite a bit of time on the Shammai versus Hillel fight about the menorah lighting. And you don't just say, you know, Shammai said, let's start with all 8 and deplete, you know, light, you know, one candle comes away each night. And Hillel obviously won the argument, and we add light each night. And you end by saying that, I don't know if it's you personally, have 2 menorahs and you light it both ways. Can you talk about that?
No, I think this is, you know, the different halachic or legal opinions of Hillel and Shammai are very interesting, but each one of them, it's not just, you know, a legal way of thinking. It's a philosophical way of understanding life. Are we, like Shammai argues, we come to the world with everything, with all our capacities. Everything is there, and then every single day that passes, we have a little less until the light is completely distinguished. Or the other way around, you know, we are born with little, and every day we learn, we grow, we encounter, we have, you know, we become richer and richer with our relationships and everything we learn, and we become bigger and bigger. And in my home, we light both menorahs, both Chanukiot, to sort of make present, to allow us to see these two directions. And I think that's a very meaningful thing.
It is. So you say something challenging, which I would agree with, is that it could be argued that many Jews around the world have a kind of shallow Jewish soil. I love that terminology, because it's not
also
so
in
judgmental.
Israel, by the way. That's not about the Jews outside Israel. It's about Israelis, not
as well. No, but you talked about the Pew study of 2020 that found that 1/4 of American Jews are Jews of no religion. I'll speak for American Jews. We are of shallow soil, many of us, even if it's not your indictment. But I think that what is challenging about your book, and actually kind of a balm to some of the shallowness, is that you're not giving us the things we usually learn. You're kind of asking us to take a journey with you. You can't read this book quickly, I think. It's almost
No.
like take the month that we're in, read every page, read it with others. I mean, it's not dense in the sense that it's not understandable, but it isn't what you expect, which is like, here's the prayer, here's the ritual, here's the meaning. You're kind of taking us on a different kind of path. And I guess I want to just address the shallowness of Jewish soil for many of us. I'll just own that. What would you argue is lost if we stay in the shallow? What are we missing out on?
I think we're in everything in life, if you go as deeper as you go, the more meaningful and colorful and vibrant your life actually is. I think that's something that I would argue here, right? Seriously, I think this is really what I try to do in this book. I don't tell you that's how you do things. This is not a how-to kind of book. This is an invitation. Look
Right.
what Hillel did. Look what Shammai did. Look what I do at my home. See what you want to do with it, right? And there is a beautiful, beautiful study guide that the CCR Press prepared for this book, and I think this is a very, wonderful tool that people can use in order to get deeper with this book, and really ask interesting questions every month about what we can do, how we can do it with the family, with the congregation, with friends, with the spouse, with our children. In our Rosh Chodesh group, there's a beautiful playlist they made of the songs that are mentioned there. So it's an invitation for practice. I know that it is used in many congregations for Rosh Chodesh groups or adult ed every month, or for introduction to Judaism. Every time I get a letter like this, and I get them almost every day, it really warms my heart, because that's what I try to do here.
Yeah. When you say, I just want to make sure everyone who does not know what a Rosh Chodesh group is, my mom has been in one. Why don't you explain it very quickly?
So the new day of the month, when the moon is hardly visible, we celebrate the new Jewish month. That's Rosh Chodesh, literally speaking, the head of the month. And traditionally, it was a festival of women. I mean, everybody observed it. There are special prayers, and we read from the Torah, etc. But it was a festival of women. Women used to gather and do things together, and that lost to us with this very hectic life that we're having. And today, I think in the last few decades, Jewish women in North America, in Israel, in Europe, are seeking ways to do things together. Um, yes, and Rosh Chodesh is a place where people meet and they study together. Sometimes they light candles, Rosh Chodesh candles. Sometimes and in many of these groups you study something, and I feel so privileged and that so many Rosh Chodesh groups chose to do something from this book.
So great. Dalia, you mentioned early in our conversation that originally the month of Nissan was the first month of the year, and you pose in your book, what might Judaism look like had the month of Nisan remained the first month of the year? What if the year, you write, started with thinking about Exodus and redemption, about new beginnings, instead of days of beating our fists against our chests as we confess our sins? Just to remind people that Nisan is when Passover arrives. So that was also, I know there from my book, there are actually 4 new years in our Jewish calendar, 4 chances to reset and start again. But how would you answer your own question? What would Judaism have looked like if we had started our year in Nisan? What do you think?
In Nissan, the days are getting longer and longer. It's springtime. The birds are chirping. Baby birds are born. Flowers everywhere in our part of the world, right? Yours and mine also. It would look different than celebrating it in September, October, when the days are getting shorter and you get more introvert and you are more contemplative. This is not a time for fireworks. And I remember when I was in the States, the fireworks on New Year's Eve, that's not Rosh Hashanah. And there's something else here. Nissan is the month where the Israelite people was born. We were born as a people when we left Egypt. Yeah, we went through this great birth canal. That's the Sea of Reed, and we were born into the wilderness and then to the land of Israel. Rosh Hashanah is different. Rosh Hashanah is not a particular national day. Rosh Hashanah, according to our tradition, is a universalistic day. It's a cosmic day. It's a day, Hayom Harat Olam. Today the world was conceived, as we say in our liturgy. So according to some tradition, on Rosh Hashanah, the whole world was created. And according to other tradition, the world was created 7 days before, a few days before. And on Rosh Hashanah, the human beings, Adam and Eve, were created. So this is something that takes us, I mean, the fact that Jewish culture chose the international, universal, cosmic day, I think is telling, right? Because it says that we have our own culture and we look inwards, but we are part of the world. We're not separate. You know, we are part of the humanity in a meaningful way.
Wonderful. So I just want to end with your dedication, because it was very moving. As someone who knew Rabbi Aaron Pankin before he left us too soon, you say, from time to time is dedicated to the loving memory of our teacher, leader, and friend, Rabbi Dr. Aaron D. Pankin, the former president of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, who was taken from us too early. Can you just talk a little bit about your relationship with Rabbi Pankin and why this dedication?
Well, Rabbi Pankin, I really loved him a lot. I felt he was a friend and he was a teacher. As I wrote there, this is just the way it is. And we were all very shocked and traumatized when he left us so early. His wife, Lisa Messenger, took upon herself to fundraise for this book, and she addressed some of her friends, and they enabled this book to come to true. And I'm truly thankful for her. So this book comes to remember Rabbi Pankin, and unfortunately, it remembers two of our former presidents at Hebrew Union College, Rabbi Pankin and Rabbi Ellenson. Both of them were my teachers and my friends. So I feel beautiful. especially compelled to bring this book to light and to life because of their memory.
I do know Lisa Messenger. She is a force and a friend to so many of us in the Jewish world. And you have written a book that I think would honor both Rabbi Pankin and Rabbi Ellenson if they had lived to see it actually connect all of us and instruct all of us and anchor all of us at a time when, frankly, I think we need new ideas to bring us and new leadership to bring us back to what matters and when we're reeling for so many reasons. Rabbi Dalia Marx, thank you so much. Everyone, if you're brave enough to read this on your own, do it, because it's worth it. I did it on my own, but I will say it's going to be much richer in conversation. So bring it to your communities, to your kitchen tables, to your rabbis, to your Rosh Chodesh groups. I'm Abigail Pogrebin for In the Spotlight, and I am wishing you all such a sweet new year. See you next time.